Welcome back to more The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Last time we entered the Great Bay Temple, so this time we're diving deeper into the dungeon. I've talked about this a bit before, but I feel like Majora's Mask has an unusually steep difficulty curve. It honestly makes sense because there are only 4 main regions, so the ramp up between dungeons ends up feeling a lot faster than usual. It definitely stands out in an area like this that I feel is significantly tougher than either of the previous temples we've been in. There's a stray fairy down there, along with another one at the top of this area. You found a stray fairy, this is your 4th one. You found a stray fairy, this is your 5th one. Next up, we want to hop into the water and swim through the top entrance in this area. This can be a little bit difficult because of the current. It can kind of pull you away from the entrance if you're not careful. Through here, we have more of these skeletal fish, and before we move on, I want to climb out of the water, because if we look over here, there's actually a treasure chest, and we can access it using the hook shot. While we're over here, we can also use the hookshot and the Great Fairy's Mask to break one of the jars over here to find another stray fairy. You found a stray fairy, this is your 6th one. You found the dungeon map. Press start to open the subscreens and view the map screen. Areas on the map that appear in blue are places you have visited. Your current location is the flashing area. Use the control stick to view another floor. So let's hop back into the water and see where this next tunnel takes us. Along the way, there are a couple of jars. If you're running low on magic, you might want to stop and break them just in case, because in this particular temple, you'll be needing a lot of magic, both for the Zora form and something else that we'll be seeing in the very near future, actually. These hands will try to throw you away from the path, but luckily you can use the shield to easily take care of them. This tunnel is kind of tricky to swim through successfully in this version because of how fast we swim. Again, a case could be made for the slower swimming speed in the 3DS version for sections like that, but overall it's not that difficult either way. We have a new variant of Deku Baba that can actually sprout vines to walk around, which is definitely terrifying. There's one more Deku Baba on the opposite side of the room, and I think we'll use arrows to fight it. I'm pretty sure a direct hit will actually defeat it instantly, but if you attack the vine, that's what causes it to drop down like that. And we can carefully hop over to this treasure chest. By the way, for some jumps, they're a lot easier to make as a Zora because you have extra height. You found a stray fairy, this is your 7th one. And with that, we are free to move on. Let's hop over here and see what's through this next door. We have more of the Deku Babas, so let's try to defeat them. I'll make it easier to get the treasure chest later, if we don't have to worry about them. There's also one of the hand enemies as well, but luckily they're easy to take out with the Zora form. And we also have a bomb shoe, so let's actually take it out so it doesn't try to attack us while we're hopping over to this treasure chest. But again, if you're having trouble making this jump, you can either use the hook shot or swap to the Zora form for extra height. You found the compass. Now many of the dungeon's hidden things will appear on the map. Alright, next up, we want to drop down to see what's inside the treasure chest at the bottom of this chamber. You got a small key. Use it to open a locked door. You can use the key only in this dungeon. Next up, we want to rise to the top of this area. By the way, there's an area over there that we can't get to yet, blocked by ice, but also we can't actually make it to that ledge, Zora form or not. So we'll worry about that later. For now, we should be able to find a stray fairy over here. If we look down into this passage, there should be a jar. You found a stray fairy. This is your 8th one. Now that we have a key, we want to head back to the central chamber, and I think we have to swim through one of the bottom paths. So let's try this again. It can be a little bit tricky because of the currents, so we got through that no problem though. From here, we want to swim up to a pipe. It should be somewhere over here. There are also Octoroks around. We'll have to interact with them later, but for now, we should move on to this pipe, climb up, and see what's through the locked door, now that we have a key. Let's also worry about the bomb chew, try to sneak past. And in here we have essentially a restocking room, which honestly should be very worrying that they're giving you arrows and magic in a room like this, and bombs. So once you are stocked up on as many items as you want, I would also recommend equipping the blast mask for this, along with potentially standard bombs as well, and then you're ready to move on. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be anything in here. However, if we look up, this is Wart, a very interesting mini-boss. My recommendation would be to use the Blast Mask to take out as many of these bubbles as possible, and then when they fall off, you can use spin attacks, or regular attacks for that matter, to break as many of them as possible. They don't respawn, so ultimately your goal is to basically create an opening to fire an arrow at Wart's eye. To tell the truth, I am worried about how well this fight will go. I usually take a lot of damage in this fight, and with only 3 hearts, this could definitely go poorly. This might be where we have our first death. I'm actually expecting it, to be honest. There are a couple of jars around the edges of the room in case we need healing, but even then, there are limits to that. So we have to be a little bit careful. Again, if we can get through this without losing all of our health, I'd be very happy, but also very surprised at the same time. I do feel like using bombs and then spin attacks to take out as many of the bubbles as possible is your best bet. Again, once you've taken out enough, you can actually get a clear shot at the eye, but again, that's sometimes easier said than done. Yeah, just barely too many. Oh wait, we actually did get a hit there. After a few hits, all of the bubbles that are currently left will drop, and it'll start charging around the room, making it a lot tougher in some ways to actually deal with the bubbles and the boss. So in actuality, you might want to take out a few more of the bubbles before entering phase 2, just to give yourself a little bit more of an opening to like giving you more room to move around, basically, not have to worry about fighting all the bubbles and Wart at the same time. Alright, this should be enough. I actually lost count of how many hits this is, but I think this might be enough to activate the next phase, unfortunately. By the way, I feel like this boss is very similar to one in A Link to the Past, but in that fight you actually use the hook shot mostly. In this fight you can still use the hook shot, but it's a lot less efficient, to be honest. Luckily there's a fairy, so we're back to full health. But we also have to worry about Wart charging around and also a ton of bubbles that are left over. Let's deal with the bubbles first. Try not to lose track of the boss as it's charging around either, because that's not great either, taking a ton of damage. There's the boss. There are a couple bubbles left. And again, it's very scary trying to dodge all of this at the same time. You can use arrows, but now that it's on the ground, you can also use sword attacks as well, like this. One more hit should be enough, but that requires surviving long enough. Let's try here. Not close enough. You got the Ice Arrow. Set it to C to power up your arrows. Now you can freeze enemies and objects. Try it everywhere. Before we go and try that, let's actually stop and collect a few items, or not, I guess. That's fine. That's like one of the scarier parts of this temple, so I'm glad to have gotten through that at least. Let's actually try to restock here. Again, you need a lot of arrows and a lot of magic for this temple, so try to be topped off on both as much as possible. But yeah, I was really worried about that fight, so I'm actually glad we got through it without too much trouble. Through here, we can actually test out our new item, though. Remember how there are a bunch of Octoroks? Well, let's try to use the ice arrows on them. If I can actually locate any of the Octoroks. I think they're actually closer to the other side, like closer to land. So let's actually swim back over here. I probably should have transformed because there's still enemies in the water, but it's fine. We'll swim over and freeze one of the Octoroks. And now we can hop over to this switch here. With that activated, I think we have to head back to an earlier point in the dungeon. This dungeon involves a lot of backtracking, actually. Let's actually equip this here, and then the Zora mask to see right. From here, I think there should be an exit to the main chamber over this way. Yeah, like this should take us back to the main room, hopefully. Yep, like so. And from here, I think we want to swim back over to the top area now that we have ice arrows. We can actually access a few new areas by freezing the water, which we can actually do with the ice arrows. In the 3DS version, the ice arrows were actually changed, so you can only freeze specific points in the water that are like sparkling. This is another very unpopular change. This was seen as somewhat condescending, actually, and that's why this change was so divisive. It is interesting, actually, that the Great Bay area has the most changes, like with the Zora swimming, moving, Shiro and the stone mask, and changing how ice arrows work. So yeah, a lot was actually altered for this specific area in the 3DS version, which is very interesting, especially because I do consider this a notable difficulty spike. We can freeze this Octorok, and we have to quickly, before it unfreezes, push the block over here, and then climb up, and then activate this next switch. It will thaw out eventually, so we have to hurry a little bit. From here, I think we have to go back to the area with the compass, because now that we have ice arrows, we'll be able to access the upper ledge that we weren't able to climb up to earlier. Even though this is like my 4th playthrough of Majora's Mask in total, one on Wii Virtual Console, one on Wii U Virtual Console, and one on the 3DS version, I still feel like I don't entirely remember everything about this temple, which is a testament, I think, to how convoluted it can feel that after multiple playthroughs, I still struggle to remember the exact order of operations here. So yeah, we can actually swim over here and access the little area that we passed by earlier. We also need fire arrows, oddly enough, so we need both types of arrows, but we can only equip one at a time. It is true that the ice arrows are a lot more unwieldy in this version because you have to actually manually line everything up instead of having like predetermined points that you can actually freeze. So yeah, you can sometimes line things up really poorly for yourself, so be aware of that. Next up we have to thaw this out. Before we head inside, I want to re-equip the ice arrows, and oddly enough, I think I want to equip the bunny hood for something. And we have another gecko who will run around the room, hiding behind these bubbles. After taking damage, Gecko will jump into the bubbles and try to basically drop down on you from above. What you want to do is look out for the shadow, and then when you have an opening, freeze the bubble. And now we can deal damage again. Overall, this fight isn't too difficult. It can definitely be tricky to keep track of where the bubble is, especially without manual camera controls in this version, but overall it isn't too difficult. Again, I do recommend the bunny hood though, one to avoid the bubble, and also to catch up to Gecko a lot faster and more easily. Alright, one more hit should be enough to finish the fight. That wasn't enough to freeze it, actually, because it was mid-drop. Let's try this again. And with that, we have defeated Gecko once again. At this point, if you have the Dongero's mask, you actually have access to a side quest involving all the frogs. There's one here, obviously. There's the one that the other Gecko fight was tied to in the Woodfall Temple. There's one in the Southern Swamp, one in the Laundry Pool, and if you round up all the frogs and then defeat Goat again and bring Spring to the mountain village, all the frogs will meet up there for a minigame, if I'm not mistaken. Again, that's for a heart piece, so we won't be tackling that for a while. But yeah, this is the earliest point where you can actually reach all 5 frogs. Alright, so next up we want to head through the open door here. You got the boss key! Now you can enter the chamber where the boss lurks. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like the order of operations for this temple are actually kind of odd inherently, in addition to just it being complicated because of like having to find all the switches tied to the water pipes. But even then, finding the dungeon map, the compass, and the boss key this early on feels kind of unusual actually. Next up, I think we actually have to return to the start of this area for something. So let's rise up to the surface and then try to climb out of the water, which again is a little bit easier said than done because of the current. So from here, I'm actually going the wrong way. We actually have to go up to the southern part, which I don't know if there's a ladder on this side. I hope there is, actually. Otherwise, we'll have to hop onto the water wheel, essentially, and then go around. But otherwise, yep, there is a ladder. So we'll climb up over there, and then return to the entrance point of the dungeon. Yeah, even having played this multiple times, I do feel like it's a lot easier to navigate than on a first playthrough, but definitely not easy by any stretch of the imagination in general. It's a very fascinating temple. I like it in some ways because of its complexity, but also admit that it is extremely overwhelming at times. I wish I could see where there was land. All of the Skulltulas have respawned too, so let's actually unequip the ice arrows and then freeze, or not freeze, then defeat these Skulltulas. Also, we need the hook shot. And yeah, since we'll be dealing with this area a little bit here, in a bit here, we'll be taking out the Skulltulas just to clear a path for later. Next up, we actually have this red switch. Now that the water is flowing over here, we have another one of these little geysers to help us across. And lo and behold, there's also a hookshot target for us to easily make it over to this next switch. So now we have a bit of a problem. The water wheel is stuck because we have the yellow water flow and the red water flow. So now we have to hop into the water and deactivate the yellow switch here. With that taken care of, we have to head back to the central chamber. I do think the Great Bay Temple in some ways is actually kind of overhated, especially as I'm going through it again. This is actually a very impressive temple. It just has the problem of being extraordinarily overwhelming on a first playthrough. It's definitely one of those things that it's more fun when you have an understanding of like the mechanics and how everything works, but if you're just trying to do this with a time limit, no less, I can definitely see why this ends up being a lot of people's least favorite temple in Majora's Mask. Yeah, I actually like it to some extent because of its complexity, even though, again, it's also extraordinarily overwhelming at the same time. Next up, we have to hop over here, and now that we have ice arrows, we have this ladder that's actually blocked off by a waterfall, but we can actually do something about it. So now we can climb up here, make our way past the waterfall through the door. In here we have a very interesting room. We have some Tektites, so I think I'll actually deal with them first if we can. And we basically need to use the ice arrows to make our way over to the switch in that corner. I think there are more Tektites, it's fine, we'll deal with them if that comes up, but for now we'll try to carefully hop across. Again, I almost feel like I understand why they tried to make it easier in the 3DS version, but I do remember the lack of freedom in this room actually making it in some ways tougher because you had fixed points instead of being able to like, just freeze wherever. Alright, now that that pipe's flowing, there's still one more thing to do here. It's actually kind of obscure. We do have the hook shot. I actually had to double check for a moment. Just in case, because this is on a time limit. These platforms do melt after a while. Luckily, you can climb onto them from the water, so it's not too big of a deal if you, like, fall. The only downside is if, like, you don't have a platform like this, and then you're just kind of stuck, and then you have to, like, go all the way back to the entrance. And try again. So yeah, this is the one downside of this dungeon, I'd say, is this, like, section here, but again, it's not that big of a deal, except if you're trying to complete it. By the way, you could actually make a case to not collect the stray fairies in a 3-heart run for this specific temple, because the reward is actually extremely good, and to some extent might actually trivialize a 3-heart run. So a lot of people, when they do 3-heart runs, actually skip the stray fairies of this temple specifically, or all of them. Sometimes people don't get any of the stray fairy rewards, just for the ultimate challenge, basically. The hardest part here is actually getting an ice block as far away into this corner as possible, like so. And now, if we set this up correctly, we can hook shot up to the top of this area. You found a stray fairy. This is your 9th one. We also have a red rupee up here that we might as well get since it's on the way, and we can head back to the central chamber once again. Alright, so we actually got pretty far into the temple, and we'll be continuing to explore it next time. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask.